So my name's Dawn from For the Region, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here this morning hosting this amazing co-creative discussion about the future of our regional food system here in South West Wales. Now, I know many of you were with us last night, and hopefully you've had a good night's sleep in between, and of course many new faces who weren't able to be with us yesterday evening. But we're embarking on part 2 of the Regional Food Conference, and in a way this is where the action will happen. Today's discussion will be really focused on what we can do, what solutions we can emerge from amongst us all, and how we can take some of those things forward to start to address the big challenges and opportunities that face us across our region. Yesterday's discussion was really fantastic and diverse, but it's just the beginning, because today's discussion, I'm sure, will emerge much more of that. So a little bit about why we're running this conference. You know, we really feel that there's a huge opportunity in South West Wales to connect the dots, connect the different agents within the food system, businesses, communities, people, farmers, public organisations, the health authorities, education, community groups. Connect us all up into one conversation, firstly about what we want and what we would love to see, and then today about what can we do, how can we work better together, how can we break down those silos, share best practice across the region, learn from each other, hear different perspectives. You know, one of the key things about these meetings is listening to each other and hearing from people that we might not always get the opportunity to talk to in our everyday lives. It informs us all in our work as we go forward. And what will come out of today's conference, we hope, will be a number of small working groups taking forward project initiative ideas, a really important manifesto for the future of our regional food system, but not a manifesto that says, oh, government should do this and government should do that. That's obviously part of the equation, but a really important part of the equation is that we're all agents for change as individuals and communities and as small businesses in the system. It's a manifesto that will highlight key actions and activities that all of us can play a part in taking forward. And I said this last night, but the agenda of this meeting and the outcomes of this discussion are not owned by us For the Region or by Phil at Swansea Environment Centre, who's co-hosting the Swansea Environmental Forum, are co-hosting this meeting. It's owned by all of you. So hopefully there'll be wisdom and insight and ideas and connections that will benefit you in your work going forward, or give you ideas of how you can be part of the solution. And also there certainly will be the opportunity for you to share what you're already doing. Tell us about the amazing food related projects, businesses, initiatives and organisations that you're involved with, and give us your calls to action. How can we get involved and support the work that you're doing? There'll be an opportunity towards the end of the session, as we approach 1 o'clock, to really share anything you'd like the rest of the group to hear about. I'm looking for raised hands now. Anyone who would like to share about what feels important to you, why you're here, what fills you with the greatest sense of purpose around our food system here in South West Wales. Please do put your hands up.
Yeah, I'm Neath, and I'm here representing a project called Cowine. Cowine is a Welsh government funded project delivered by a company called Mentor a Business. So we work closely with food and drink producers all across Wales. I cover the Pembrokeshire area specifically. So the main points that came out of our group discussion now were mainly focused on education, as you touched upon at the beginning. Food waste as well is important, and uncertainty on Brexit, especially for producers moving forward over the next couple of years, and the worry about the lack of funding that might be available to them to develop their businesses.
Thank you.
So they were the key points.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neath. Thanks for sharing. Lovely to hear from you.
I'm here because I think we're all concerned about the problem of what we eat, whether it's the right kind of food, locally grown, nutritious, wholesome, and we need to do something because our governments are not. So that's why I'm here. And I did say in the chat that I'm with Hywel Community Health Council, and we've been badgering Hywel to provide locally grown organic food in the hospitals for their patients and visitors for a long time. We don't seem to be having too much of an impact at the moment when we keep on badgering them to do that.
So I work very much community-based, and to me, food is a great connector. I mean, whether we're eating it, enjoying it together, or just sort of going out to whine about it. And I think, you know, I mean, I would like to see that connection within people. I really enjoy that idea of it sort of, one is a networking event in a traditional sense, but also actually, do you know what, let's start connecting people and food back to people again. So that's what I would like to see.
One of the things which I want to do today is understand a wider appreciation of the situation. Mostly I deal with large manufacturers and large food producers. So to get a wider appreciation of people's opinions and their thoughts and where they're going is very important to me, first of all. Otherwise I get isolated in the big manufacturing bubble. The main issues that I'm dealing with on an everyday basis is food waste, the reduction and control, food quality, trying to get the food industry to use all the parts of the raw material, byproduct manufacturing. And then obviously the big issue for many people is packaging. And I just want to say that plastic isn't evil, it's what people do with plastic is the problem.
I'm Elizabeth Westward, Director of Growing Real Food for Nutrition, CIC, which is promoting learning how to grow, measure and promote the benefits of nutrient-dense food. So I am very concerned about the global health emergency, which often doesn't get mentioned behind the climate and biodiversity emergencies. So the health emergency is resulting in epidemic proportions or prevalences of diet-related non-communicable diseases, which are having serious impacts on individuals, families, communities, and the health services that often don't serve those patients. So it's all about improving soil health and food quality, and that's what I want to promote. Thank you.
I'm here as a farmer who grows potatoes in southwest Pembrokeshire, and I suppose I would be described as a large farmer in a lot of your perceptions. As a potato farmer in the UK, I would be on the small side, but the joy for me is that everything I produce is consumed in Wales at the moment, but it all goes through the large retail outlets, so from Tesco's down to Aldi and everywhere in between, basically. But the joy is most of my potatoes are named. It's got my name on the package that I produced it, and I can see them in my local supermarket. So although I'm not personally supplying my local village, I'm actually to be able to do it economically efficiently, I have to have a certain degree of scale. And I think that's one thing that gets lost sometimes, that actually once you start growing, you need to grow more to make it efficient. Once you get skilled at something, it's easier for you to do more. And in some of the chat yesterday, there was talk about maybe if we're good at something, we can export it. Absolutely. But also if we're not good at it, it's actually very reasonable for us to import it too. We have to accept what we can do here in Wales. Whether we have too much rain, not enough sunshine, it's not warm enough to grow bananas, we're always going to have to import them. And so we have to get that sort of acceptance that some things we can do and some things we can't. But yeah, I'm here to engage with what's going on and to say that there is a relatively cuddly face of large agriculture, as well as us sometimes being demonized a little bit. We are doing our best, and it's a learning process, and we're changing all the time if we possibly can. Thank you.
Well, I've got you, Walter, and thank you very much for that contribution. And you have got a very cuddly face, so thank you for that. I think there's some shocking statistic that actually in Wales, we only produce about 1/4 of a portion of veg per person in Wales. Do you see that there's scope to massively improve upon that? Or do you feel like we're pipe dreaming when we think we should seek that sort of radical shift towards growing more of our own veg?
I think there are two strands to that. Certainly locally produced in small situations where people buy into the value that that delivers beyond the sort of nutritional value, absolutely. But once you get into the, if I can use the term, the larger conurbations, and even in the smaller towns where you've got that disconnect to the land, it's about convenience and price and how much value they can get. And then you've got to look, to my mind, to the price point at this moment in time, because people have got lots of demands on their spending money, and so sometimes then we can't produce cauliflowers in the summer as efficiently as they can in Lincolnshire. They've got large tracts of land. There are small pieces of land up at Queensferry, perhaps in North Wales on the de-estuary places, but most of our land is not, and it doesn't enable us to be that efficient. And so we've got that quandary, and it is always going to be a problem for us in Wales, just because of our land base and our climate.
Well, I'm here because I'm most really concerned about ecological and climate breakdown. And I think it's the most important issue that we face. And what we eat, and how we use our land, I think is the most important and challenging issue in that context. And it needs huge changes from a lot of the business as usual, which is driven a lot by subsidies. And if we're going to have sustainable futures, then we need those conversations between, I like your Pembrokeshire potatoes. I think I may have bought them from the market, but maybe not. Maybe you can only get them in supermarkets. But, you know, at the moment we've got plenty of produce, but it's very seasonal. And we need to think about how we're going to extend our seasons and how we're going to keep processing our foods in different ways to be able to make it go through the whole year. So I think there's sea changes in everything, and it shouldn't just be driven by, is it the cheapest? Because we've got to have a circular economy to really see what it's really costing.
I've been a head gardener and gardener for about 40 years, and in that time I've really noticed the impact of climate change, especially on soil. And I think that we've really got to take care of our soil. The way we use machinery on it will have to change with changing weather patterns, etc. And a couple other points I wanted to say is that we need food to be local, but also we, as the farmer mentioned it, we have to recognise that we need international trade, and we must look outwards as well. And finally, actually two more points, disabled people need to be included, as do other minorities in the decision-making process, which is pretty obvious, hopefully. And finally, that everything's connected. Because even the small, whilst we need to prioritise the big things like climate change, we also actually have to do all the little things as well. We've got a big job on our hands, and we need to see the connections.
I know a few on the call already, and I introduced myself in the last group. My name's Rhys James. I'm from Caerphilly Council. I'm a Principal Procurement Officer, working with the Welsh Local Government Association to procure food at the moment for pretty much most of Wales, apart from the north bit, who would like to do their own thing. Obviously, this area that we're talking of here, Carmarthenshire, Pembrokeshire, Neath, Talbot, Swansea, are in that group at the moment. We've had a food meeting with the procurement people, the catering people there. For me, it's like you said at the start, in the introductions, is joining the dots with others to find out what's going on in food. I noticed you mentioned procurement being a lever at the start. Yeah, it is definitely, and we can lever as much as we can. But public procurement, the spend in that is nowhere near the spends that we're talking of supermarkets and things like that. I think ours is about 75 million a year. One Tesco's, the Tesco's in Culverhouse Cross in Cardiff is 90 to 95 million a year. So compared to one Tesco's, we're small fry really. But we are looking as part of our project now. We got 2 years to get our contracts in place. We're looking as part of that to engage with as many people as we can and try and influence Welsh food in our schools, care homes, day centres, anything really, that as much as we can.
Dairy and beef farmer actually from Swansea. We farm both in Gyseinen and down in Oxwich on Gower. I guess what's the main reason I'm here is, I'd like to be a farmer and producer myself all my life. My family has farmed for 3 generations now in Swansea. I'd like to, have some input into the regional food conference, have a bit of a discussion, and show that, at least from a Welsh and UK agriculture standpoint, that it's not a black and white case of meat and dairy is bad and veg growing is good. It's a lot more complex than that. We're permanent pasture. We actually haven't ploughed since the 90s with us. We catch rainwater from our sheds and have woodland and wildflowers. We use no straight fertilizers, and we get nitrogen fixation from our clover, so we're trying to farm as regeneratively as possible. What I would like to see is more focus on shortened supply chains. I think a lot of we're in the Tesco Sustainable Dairy Group ourselves, where our milk goes into mature cheddar, medium cheddar, red Leicester, and double Gloucester. I would rather see quite a lot more focus on farm gate sales, supply in your local area like we used to do. We used to do a lot of mixed farming. And supply a number of towns around us with both veg and milk, so straight from the farm. Unfortunately, the demand for cheap food and the need for cheap food, actually, which is another thing that we will need to address. We'll need to try and enable people to. There'll be a lot of people who want to eat sustainably but can't really afford it. But then on the other hand, the farmers would want to produce sustainably, but they really can't make a living. So it's addressing that catch-22 really. So yeah, I'm here mainly to say that dairy and beef is not all bad as what people make out. So.
Thanks, Andrew. Really great to have you here and sharing your perspectives. Lovely to hear from you. And again, hopefully we'll hear more from you as the day goes on. So I think that was a fantastic beginning to today's discussion. Really broad diversity of different perspectives, raising all sorts of questions for us to consider, and voices from right across the food system and right across the region. So very grateful to all of you for sharing your thoughts, and please do keep using the chat for that process as well. Now, I am really delighted to be joined this morning by Julie James, who is our member of the Senedd, Minister for Climate Change. Julie, thank you so much for being here with us. You've had a little opportunity there to listen to some of the voices from across the region, so hopefully that has been helpful. But we're really delighted to have you as our opening address, as our keynote speaker. Your new role, it's still sort of new as Minister for Climate Change. The fact that Wales even has a Minister for Climate Change is clearly a statement of intent. But where does food factor into your work? And what do you think are the policy levers that are being used in Wales to make changes in our food system? And what are your hopes for a conference like this and for today's discussion? We'd love for you to share your perspectives and update us all on what you're up to and what you'd love to see. So can I hand over to you for about 10-15 minutes, Julie?
Thanks very much, Dawn, and it's a real pleasure to be here, and congratulations on what's clearly already been an instructive and interactive day. I'm really pleased to be here to speak to you today at a regional food conference. Today, I want to talk about the future of food production and farming in Wales, the role that farmers, communities and Welsh businesses have in protecting our environment, building our economy and safeguarding our really very incredible countryside for future generations. Food production is obviously a crucial part of the Welsh economy. We're very proud of the quality of our regional produce and proud of our high welfare standards, and incredibly proud of how our producers weathered the storm of the COVID pandemic and kept us all fed. We often Hear about the important role of health and care workers across the pandemic, rightly celebrated, perhaps not as well rewarded as we would like here in Wales. But the media and people of Wales are not always noting the huge gratitude we really owe everyone involved in keeping our food supplies flowing through such a difficult time. So I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who played their part in producing our food, making it available in shops, and of course promoting it to the public. The sheer resilience and ingenuity business showed during the pandemic speaks for itself. So I think it's really important for governments to acknowledge the hard work, dedication and effort, really heroic contribution that went into keeping the nation going during that time. And I do not say that lightly. I absolutely do understand what that took to keep that going. But of course, the pandemic is by no means the only emergency we face, not even really the biggest emergency. The climate emergency is the biggest risk we face, not just as a country in Wales, but as a planet. So in forming the new government, Mark Drakeford, the First Minister, has asked me to put the environment, biodiversity loss and climate change at the absolute heart of everything we do as a government. The new portfolio brings together responsibilities for housing, transport, planning, energy and the environment. And we will tackle the dangers of climate change, enhance our natural assets to the full and start the build of the green sustainable future for Wales that we know that everyone in Wales really hopes to see. But absolutely, obviously, I can't tackle a climate emergency on my own. So very much part of my role, the central part of my role, is to start the process of a Team Wales approach with contributions from across cabinet colleagues, local government, across businesses, individuals, and indeed organisations, Dawn, such as this, that bring together groupings of people, like-minded and otherwise, people to discuss, debate, and find a way forward. We've already heard, and great to hear from Andrew, by the way, that Welsh agriculture is at the heart of many of our rural communities. We are rightly proud, as he said, of our high standards in food, farming and land management, and they are absolutely key to our response to the climate emergency. You'll be aware that Wales is committed in legislation to achieving a net zero carbon emission by 2050. To deliver this, we need to make fundamental changes across all sectors, including agriculture. This is not a prophecy of doom, but I just want to emphasize the point by saying that in order to achieve that target, we have to reduce our emissions by twice as much in the next 10 years as we have managed to do in the last 30. So this is not a small thing, it's a very big ambition. We absolutely all have to pull together to do this. So in order to do that, we need to deliver new woodlands. We need to create the opportunity for communities, farmers and other landowners to be at the heart of creating a new economy around wood in Wales. This will of course mean planting trees on a scale never seen to date in Wales. We estimate that it may require converting around 10% of current agricultural land in Wales to woodlands. We need to plant new woodlands and increase the planting of hedgerows and insect-friendly edges to fields. We need to work with our landowners to find ways to achieve this while protecting the most productive land for farming. We absolutely recognise that this is not easy. Such massive change will also be complex and wide-reaching, and we must ensure that changes are fair and create opportunities for everyone and not just a select few. And can I just emphasise at this point that we are talking about planting the right tree in the right place. We are not talking about covering the countryside with unsuitable non-native trees. We are also talking about protecting our grasslands, our wetlands, our blanket bogs, peatlands, a large number of other carbon sequestration, protected landscapes across Wales that really do need to be enhanced and brought back into good conservation order. But of course, the changes that we want to see also bring opportunities. And I really do believe that developing our land will not just reduce emissions, but will create new economic opportunities, whole new skills and industries, particularly in rural Wales, enabling communities to stay on the land and to continue to thrive. Our industry will also need to transform, evolving from our dependency on fossil fuels and focus on sustainability. We need an agricultural industry with not only low environmental impacts, but one that actually benefits nature, restores biodiversity, and contributes ever more to our economy. So this will involve new innovative technologies to further reduce the greenhouse emissions associated with food production. These technologies will continue to emerge and farmers need to be ready to make the most of them. We work really closely with the farming unions, communities of farmers around Wales and our universities to make the absolute most of the best brains across Wales and the planet. And I was very privileged to be promoting a report, the Elsevier report, only last week, which shows the impact of global research from Welsh universities. We are able to make a real change from our lovely researchers in our Welsh universities, working in collaboration with our farmers and landowners to bring about those changes. And those changes benefit not only Wales, but of course global nationalities right across the world. So it's, it's really important for Wales to take its place on that global stage. So we envisage a future where farmers enjoy sustainable businesses recognized not just for high quality sustainable food, but also for the delivery of environmental outcomes, improving and safeguarding soils, air, water, and biodiversity. To help achieve this, we need to create a new system of farm support to maximize the protective power of nature through our farming. Our future farm support will reward active farmers who take action to meet the challenges of responding to the climate emergency and reversing the decline of biodiversity, supporting them to produce food sustainably. We want to help Welsh farmers to change outdated practices, support them to become increasingly sustainable, and support them to prosper in an increasingly competitive world. Our farmers will continue to receive payments, but these will be linked to the actions which an active farmer undertakes. These will reward farmers for their contribution to the health and well-being of our nation, as well as providing them with an income to support rural communities. And of course, farmers aren't the only producers in Wales. In 2019, the food and drink sector employed 33,600 people across Wales, providing important jobs in manufacturing, packaging, as well as making and servicing the equipment needed across the industry. If we add in agriculture, retail and hospitality jobs, this increases to over 239,000 jobs across Wales. In 2020, Welsh food and drink exports were worth £549 million. This is a real jewel in the crown of the Welsh economy, and it's something we absolutely must treasure and protect. But standing still, not meeting tomorrow's challenges and not exploiting tomorrow's opportunities risks us falling behind and leads to absolute disaster. So just like our farmers, the sector needs to evolve. We've published a new vision for the sector, a green and sustainable vision. Businesses will be encouraged and supported to transform outdated or emission-heavy practices, to improve their carbon footprints and to reduce the natural resources they use. Sustainable food production, as I know virtually everyone on this call has already said, is no longer something to think about moving towards. We absolutely have to do it now. Customers increasingly want responsibly sourced food and drink. A fully sustainable food production system will just not happen overnight. It's a journey we absolutely need to start traveling along. Supply chains need to be stronger and more localized. This will enable the sector to be more responsive to market demand. And customers already recognize the value of high quality, sustainably produced local products. As the industry improves, so does the story to tell to customers, increasing interest, developing greater consumer loyalty, and improving turnover. So by taking this regional sustainable approach, we also hope to ensure that value is more fairly distributed in the communities that produce and consume the goods. We absolutely have to create a stronger, more vibrant Welsh food and drink industry with a global reputation for excellence, one with an environmentally and socially responsible supply chain. So we will deliver economic success by growing these green sustainable businesses. We'll support the creation of attractive and, more importantly, fair work for people, and we will not stop promoting Wales as a food nation on the global stage. Through our trade development programme, we're helping businesses to increase trade with retailers, independent stores, the public sector and food services within the UK. We run marketing campaigns to raise awareness for our food and drink. So last year, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with our Carry Cymru, Carry Blas campaign, which it helped encourage Welsh people to buy local and support regional producers. Our last internationally focused Blas Cymru Taste Wales events resulted in £6.2 million worth of new business deals and 22 million in additional potential businesses. And of course, transforming that production goes hand in hand with dealing with waste. We set really ambitious targets to halve food waste by 2025 and prevent biodegradable materials going to landfill by that date too. We're carrying out research to better understand the carbon impact of the food chain and supply system in Wales, including the packaging. So remaining competitive, resource efficient and energy efficient is absolutely key. We want to ensure ever greater levels of recycling by introducing extended producer responsibility for packaging by 2024. New technology will enable businesses to more closely monitor their waste and help them reduce and recycle it. Better recycling also provides a new source of low carbon raw materials for manufacturers, saving energy, reducing emissions and improving customer interest. So our new circular economy fund will support manufacturers to use a higher recycled content, support businesses who repair and remanufacture, and support food businesses to put a price on any unavoidable food waste. I'm really passionate, as I'm sure many of you who know me will know, about creating a sustainable, resilient agriculture and food and drink sector in Wales for future generations. Over the last couple of years, we have really proved how working together, we can secure our food supply, enhance our environment and look after each other. As we move out of the really dark days of COVID-19, we must again work together to build the bright recovery we all want, supporting businesses, protecting rural communities and promoting Welsh produce around the world. We cannot do this alone. We have to do it together. Together, we really can make a difference. We absolutely have to, and I really know that we will. Diolch yn fawr, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of it, and I'm really happy to answer as many questions as I can in the time I've got left, Dawn.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Thanks for that. Really interesting to hear the focus on woodland and the imperative, as you say, to reduce emissions in a way that we haven't seen, you know, at a huge rate. Your closing comments there about we've got to do this together, we've got to work together. I think that's where we're coming from with events like this, with conversations like today. It's bringing together people from communities and individuals that are passionate about things, as well as small businesses and farmers, as we heard from, that really want to be part of the solution at a local level. How can Welsh Government empower communities like ours to take steps for ourselves? Because some of those sort of things that you've talked about are, you know, policy level and government level. How can we be empowered within our own communities in terms of access to land, in terms of, well, how do you think communities can empower themselves?
Yeah, so Dawn, that's a really important question, isn't it? What we need to do is we need to be able to enable, you know, organic community growth in this area, and you know, this is at all levels, isn't it? So, as I said, this isn't a council of despair. We've got a big task ahead of us, but it can be done, and it can be done by making sure that each of us is enabled to do the right thing and enabled to do it together. So, I think I just caught a contribution from one of our procurement people in local authorities. So, one of the things we can do is we can make sure that our local councils and our local food chain suppliers buy local where that's possible, and we can ensure that our local farmers have access to those markets. So, you know, it's for governments to put the platforms in place, and it's then for people like yourself to pull people together to make use of the platforms that allow that. So this is about consumer power as well. It really depresses me when I hear people say that, you know, they can't make a difference all by themselves. That simply isn't true. People power makes an enormous difference, and you can absolutely see the acceleration of that. So it's for us to put those big platforms in place, you're quite right, but it's for each individual one of us to do the right thing, and then to come together in interest groups to make sure that we make the best of that. I don't have all the answers to this. I can see loads of really interesting ideas coming up in your chat, for example, but we can do some of the big ticket items. So let me just answer a couple of the things that have come up there. One of the things that people are really worried about is the buying up of agricultural land by big globals to carbon offset. So we have a system of plans in place that will mean that you simply cannot do that. You will not be allowed to buy up a farm and just plant in you know, unsustainable trees all over it as a way of selling off carbon trading. What we want is we want the right kinds of woodland in the right place. We need our agricultural land to grow our food, but not all of our land is good agricultural land. Some of it should be forested. We need the forest to provide good biodiversity, but we need them to supply a good timber industry too. There, you know, there's an actual industry to come out of this. We want to build the low carbon homes for the future. We need to build 20,000 homes for social rent across Wales in the next 5 years. We need Welsh timber to do that. We need to produce that timber in much bigger quantities, but we need to do it in a sustainable way that doesn't affect biodiversity. So each one of us can take part in that. You know, if you are lucky enough to have land, plant that tree. If you aren't lucky enough to have it, we can come together and we can help people get access to public land or quasi-public land to start the either production of food if it's suitable for food, or start the production of timber if it's suitable for timber, or start the production of you know, biodiverse forests. So you know, woodlands, I think somebody's just put in the chat exactly what I was about to say. People forget that natural woodlands produce food. So this is a win-win situation. But what I hope to get out of your meeting today, Dawn, is ideas coming out of the region for what you would like the government to actually do to assist you, because this is what we want. The sort of things that you're doing today, the ideas that come out of it are really important to us. We're already doing some things, they're not always popular, so we need people to understand where we're coming from. So the whole issue around mass poultry production, for example, the effect it has on our rivers and water pollution and so on, is something we're very actively engaged in. But we absolutely need to do that alongside our farmers, who need to have a sustainable business. So I've had very productive meetings with the farming unions recently. Andrew and I have been trying to get together for a little while now, Andrew, and I'm really hoping to do that soon, to discuss how we can get these industries to be far more sustainable. So this isn't about not ever eating meat or dairy or ever. It's about eating locally sourced, humanely produced, sustainably produced food. There's no getting away from it. We will have to change the way that we globally have our diet, but we can do that in an affordable and sustainable way. And the last thing I will say, Dawn, is this government is absolutely determined that the burden of this will not fall on the least able to pay in our society. So this, some people really just cannot afford some of the things they need. So we need to do this in a way that makes open access for everyone and doesn't leave a section of our population behind. So, there are lots of things to think about here, but I absolutely believe that coming together, we really can do this.
Thank you, Julie. I know you're tight for time and we could talk all day. I'd love to talk to you about education, how we get schools on board, and so much more to unpack, but we're up against a really tight agenda, and you probably are as well. So if I may, I'd love to arrange a meeting following this conference to tell you what everybody said, and as you say, hopefully will emerge some great actions and initiatives that we can ask for your support to take forward. But it's great to hear that you're listening, and as you say, that endorsement of this collaborative approach is much appreciated.
I'd be really happy to do that, Dawn. I can see loads of good ideas coming up in the side, some of which are already we're already doing, some of which I'd really like to think about. So I'd be really glad to come back together to discuss outcomes and a way forward.
Lovely.
Really nice. Sorry, I've got to run. I really hope you have a good rest of the conference.
Thank you. We'll keep in touch. Thanks very much, Julie. Lovely to see you. Bye for now. Okay, great. Well, we are up against a really jam-packed agenda, but I hope that was useful to hear from the Minister. And from my perspective, really great to hear that she wants to find out what we come up with between us during this conference, and we can come back to her about it after the meeting. So we will certainly follow up with the ministers that are relevant, and the report that we produce will go to all of those key policy makers and decision makers at both local authority level and Welsh Government level. So do make sure you have your say during this conference so that we can pass on all the perspectives that emerge from this discussion. Right, what we've got now are three very brief and compelling 5-minute pitches or speakers who are going to open up different aspects of this for us. And so Kim, have we got Kim in the room? And if so, please will you unmute? Kim, great. So Kim is an advocate of something she calls the Climate Change Garden. So you're following on from the Minister, and you've got 4 or 5 minutes, Kim. Tell us, what is Climate Change Garden? And yeah, please do share.
Thank you very much, Dawn, and thank you for organising this brilliant event as well. It's fantastic to get the discussion going. I'll just do a very quick introduction because I've only got a few minutes. I'm the editor of this book, Climate Change Garden, and I edit the Organic Way magazine for Garden Organic, and I'm the representative for Wales. So I live in Ceredigion. I'm 700 foot above sea level and been very exposed to the elements in my garden. I've experienced flooding back in 2014, which I wrote about for The Guardian. I was doing a blog for The Guardian about dealing with greater extremes of weather, and my whole garden's flooded. And then extreme drought. I have a private water supply, which ran almost completely dry in 2018. If you remember, we had 6 weeks beautiful sunshine. Nice now at this time of year. And so what I've done is I've been on a mission to really look at different ways you can shore up defences when it comes to dealing with greater extremes of weather. So just to quickly go through that, what are the challenges with this? So the challenges really you're looking at on the ground, which I think more of us have experienced than ever before this year. I think there's been a flick that's been switched in terms of the fact this is actually happening, and it's been very challenging growing conditions. So you've got greater risk of pests and disease because more pests can overwinter with milder, wetter winters. You've got risks of soil erosion, particularly with this idea, traditional ideas of gardening, you know, turning over the garden, leaving it exposed to the elements. There's a massive risk of the fertility of your garden literally leaching away. But also the very formulaic processes that very traditional gold standard gardening processes we've been taught we should do, very much about work generation, very much about keeping nature in control, very much not fit for purpose with where we're at now with greater extremes of weather. So the good news is that there's lots that we can do to shore up our defences very easily. And in a couple of minutes, I'll just, I'll sort of bring out the highlights of that. But also the way that we garden now, it's worth explaining. The way we garden now is very much based on Victorian country house estate practices of gardening. It's about keeping nature in control. And if you look to the past, if there's a very good example of a medieval peasant's garden at St Fagans, which is brilliant. If you haven't seen it, I recommend having a look. And much more nature friendly, much more about using techniques like mixed planting, allowing weeds to grow, working with the natural world, seed saving, and soil health is a massively important thing. The more that you can build the soil health, the better that is. And it's about a more free-spirited way of gardening, to build resilience in the gardener as much as you do the actual garden, to say, no, that doesn't make sense to my own individual patch of allotment, windowsill, whatever it is, whatever growing space you have, and to look at a way of doing this. And during the pandemic, I think more people than ever before, again, have realised the benefit of the wonder of the natural world, the wonder of, encouraging that in, the well-being benefits of actually connecting with nature. And a lot of this is about connection. We've become very disconnected from our gardens, from our growing spaces, using gloves, using power tools. Again, it's all very consumer driven, that you must buy the latest this, you must buy the latest that. But the more we can return to the old ways, and make those our own, for our own individual space, however that can be, that'll be for everyone. And this is all very much about working within communities, because we're all in this together as well. So bartering, swapping, exchanging, sharing ideas, always being open to new ways of doing things, listening to others, and working together is really a big part of the way forward. And I think that's about 4 minutes. So I think that's probably enough. But if anyone has questions, I'd love to hear them later.
Lovely. Well, I'm sure you could post some links in the chat, but yes, you've done brilliantly in keeping to time there, Kim. Thanks so much for that. We've really appreciated hearing from that. So my intention with these 3 short speeches is to look at different perspectives from micro, as Kim says, what we can all do at a hyper-local individual level in our own backyards. Next, I'd like to introduce Tom from Kaitan Community Supported Agriculture. Tom, are you there? Can you unmute? Yes, there you are.
Yes.
Brilliant. Oh, you're out and about. Great. Tell us about your programme for training community supported agriculture projects and what that's all about.
Great. Well, thank you. And yeah, thank you, Dawn. It's amazing, actually, this conference. I'm really sorry that actually I haven't been able to make much of it, but partly because actually I'm very involved in all the things that we're talking about. So actually a lot's been going on the last few days. So I'll give you a kind of background in what we're doing. And I suppose responding to Julie James as well, I think that was really, really inspiring to hear the potential that Wales has to develop sustainable farming and sort of support more community engagement in farming. I think I come from the perspective that I think politics will follow what kind of makes sense in the long run. At the moment, actually, politics can be very disillusioning, and you feel like, oh my God, it's hard to like be heard. It's hard to like change anything. So, I mean, from my perspective, I feel like, yeah, we just have to change things ourselves. And actually politics will come round. Politics will eventually come round, and hopefully sooner rather than later. Because I think a lot of the issues that we're talking about, I think, you know, at any time, I don't want to be sort of overly sort of worrying about things, but I think we are in a very delicate situation as far as food supplies and fuel supplies go. And actually our system is so weak that it could collapse very quickly at any moment. And I do think that there's all sorts of very practical things we can do to counteract that. So I'll tell you what we're doing at Kaitan at the moment. Right at the moment, we're actually planting spring greens and harvesting all sorts of stuff for the boxes on Thursday. So we're on the Gower Peninsula. We've got 2 sites on the Gower Peninsula. We grow veg for 130 local households, and we do what is called community supported agriculture. The basic idea of community supported agriculture is that the consumer or the member of the CSA and the farmer share the risks and the rewards of farming. So we produce to the best of our ability as a grower. We are fairly paid. And then our members get a share of whatever we produce, which over the last 7 years we've been going, I'd say has actually been very financially competitive with supermarkets, with probably cheaper than other organic bot schemes. You know, it works well, and we get well paid as growers. There's all sorts of other benefits and aspects to what we do. We have a lot of community engagement on different levels. Right since we started 7 years ago, we set up an education programme, and we're now very lucky to have Jessie, who I think is on this call as well. Jessie Kidd is our education officer. So we're working with 5 schools in Swansea East, which Jessie could tell you more about. And the basic idea there is to get into those areas of Swansea, of Wales, where there is more apparent food poverty or less access to sustainable food in this kind of environment that we've got the privilege to live on out in Gower, and engage those young people in the discussion around food production and kind of open their eyes to the possibility that they themselves could be farmers. There's nothing stopping them. I mean, we can talk about that, actually, what is stopping people to access the land in a little bit. So that's one aspect. We're sort of working with kids and schools in Swansea, engaging them. We're also working with Swansea University, carrying out numerous studies here on carbon emissions and soil management and the sort of geographical people element of the work we do. We're training people. So in the last 7 years we've been going, I've estimated just now that we've put, I think, 10 people into land-based careers in the 7 years we've been here, many of those locally on Gower. I suppose the most significant for us is Big Meadow CSA, which is Abby trained with us and then went on to set up Big Meadow CSA in Llangennith, and that's thriving, now taking up to 90 households as well. So that's membership. Oh yeah, I'm just trying to quickly cover. So that's the schools, that's the membership. We have a big volunteer base. So we have 40 volunteers on a sort of regular group that we sort of share what's going on in the field each week. And I'd say from week to week, we have anything from 2 to 10 volunteers who will come and get involved. We've got our trainee program, which initially we just took on 2 trainees a year and a European kind of volunteer trainee who would come and stay with us for the summer as well. And each of those trainees have either moved on with our support to set up their own project locally, or actually all of them locally, and some of them have moved on to be employed in projects in other parts of the UK. We've also, this season, working with the Land Workers Alliance and Lantra, we've set up like a farm-based apprenticeship training. So it's like a 7-month scheme currently, and it allows all the trainees from across Wales. There were 15 this year. I think the numbers are going to go up quite a bit next year. And we arrange 5 or 6 farm visits, which are whole weekend visits, educational visits, where the farmer explains how their sustainable farm works. It's based around vegetables at the moment, but in future I hope we will have beef and dairying and cereals and all other elements of farming involved within the training programme. So that's one element. And then personally, having gone through sort of the process of spending years working in community-based land projects and then working in, you know, reasonably, well, very large-scale farms, organic and biodynamic farms in South and East France, I personally came back to scale for me is a really significant factor. I know there was a farmer, I'm very open to, I think we need to be producing on every level, but personally, I feel like actually on a human scale, which I feel we're kind of working on quite effectively at the moment with supplying 130 households, we've got not only very sustainable food production, reduced sort of machinery impact, reduced traffic on the land. We've also got huge levels of community engagement compared to a very productive sort of 1,000-acre farm producing a range of horticultural crops. So I think what we're offering not only sort of comes at attacking sort of issues around environmental issues, but it's also trying to deal with food poverty issues. We're working with a very mixed element of local communities. So yeah, we're striving to sort of be of benefit much more so. I mean, lots of people have touched on it on the call since I've only been on for the last hour, but I think agriculture and food production is based and sort of, it's so intertwined with our mental well-being, with our physical well-being, with our health. So I think, you know, there's so many elements to agriculture that I think community supported agriculture can have a massive benefit to support. And I just say one last thing, because I'm probably going on, I don't know what time it is.
That's all right, wrap it up, yeah, one more thing.
Yeah, so the one last thing is that there's not a clear way into horticulture. We've just set up and launched, that's why I wasn't on the call last night. I've launched an online training, which we've got 15 projects from all across the UK training with us on how to set up and run a successful CSA. That project, that's every week, well, 3 times a month for the next 6 months. But I'd say just very briefly, young people who are getting trained up, those training opportunities are opening up, but land isn't becoming available. I think the government needs to work to make land become more available. Startup finances aren't available. It's very difficult to start a land-based business if you're not born into it, as I wasn't. And so I think there needs to be government support for apprenticeships, for training, for access to land, and land needs to be made available. And I think there's no reason why, partly going against what someone said earlier, I think Wales could be completely self-sufficient in all sorts of produce, in every kind of produce it needs, and we could be a small exporter of that. So yeah, that's going on, a study by should and could Wales be self-sufficient in organic, in fruit and vegetables, by a lady who's probably on this call. But I'm going to leave it on that because I'm probably going on a bit. But I'm very grateful that you are running this conference, and I really look forward to hearing what comes out of it. And I'd love to have a conversation with Julie James at some point as well. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tom, for your time. I know you're a busy man, but great to hear about all the stuff that you're up to, and particularly interesting to hear about the training programme for other community supported agriculture projects, because there's so much scope for that to scale. And as you say, it's not the whole solution, but it could be a massive part of the solution. Right, one more very quick 4 or 5 minute presentation now. Duncan Fisher, I know him because we work together in the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, but he's doing some brilliant work. Angle your screen down if you can, Duncan, there we are. With an organisation called Our Food, and I particularly want Duncan to tell us about the importance of farming in for the rural economy. Duncan, will you say a few words?
Yeah, thanks very much, Dawn. Nice to see you in this context. So I'm working in Monmouthshire and the Brecon Beacons National Park, and we spent 2 years building up local social capital, local support for a programme. And so we've now got a fantastic group of powerful local stakeholders. We've got rock solid support from the Monmouthshire County Council and from the National Park Authority. I mean, top level chief executive support from both. So it's been, we haven't achieved very much in 2 years, but we achieved that, and that's the foundation. We're now setting up a new community benefit society, a locally owned body, to take the project forward and own it. The flagship project is, there are lots of things we're doing, but we've got one flagship, which is what we'll communicate to everyone, which is that we're going to acquire 1,200 acres to turn into horticulture production for local consumption. And we will, why 1,200 acres? Well, it's a nice number. Theoretically, that is actually enough horticulture to feed absolutely everyone who lives in Monmouthshire and the Brecon Beacons National Park. But it's at such a scale that if that was operating, it would create enough of a local food economy to start drawing in other types of food and offering a real alternative to local farms. To stop selling at rubbish prices to supermarkets and wholesalers and start selling at decent prices and keeping hold of the profits within our region. So that's our flagship project. We will do that by buying land or leasing it from farmers or landowners who are not using it, or simply encouraging existing farmers to convert a few fields. Horticulture is always done on a very small area, so it's not actually that difficult to find small pockets of 3 acres, 5 acres, 2 acres. We'll also have to recruit farmers. 1,200 acres means 1,200 farmers, because it's about 1 farmer per acre of this type of agriculture, instead of the average at the moment, which is 1 farmer per 70 acres. So that's a lot of people. So we have to recruit them. There are lots of, we'll go to Kaitan, which Tom just presented. We'll recruit from anywhere. There are lots of training courses and lots of interested people. So we really, we have our own, actually in our own region, we have the Black Mountains College. They're starting something up this year, just started. And of course, we'll encourage young people in the region. If we do get those people, there's absolutely nowhere for them to live. Housing is astronomically expensive around here. All young people leave the region. They don't stay here until they've got enough money to come back into the property market when they're about 40 or 50. So we have to provide housing. So we're now looking at that and looking at sort of mobile housing units that can go onto small plots of land. That will need a lot of changes in planning, but we've got the 2 authorities on board. We have to secure business startup funding, because these farms are all excluded completely from any government support because they are too small. They're not part of the supermarket system. They're less than 5 hectares, so they don't count. And the government doesn't recognise them as businesses at all. So we have to replace government. So we're working on that with the Community Foundation in Wales, see if we can set up our own alternative system. We'll work at stimulating local demand for food, but we can't do that yet. We tried that. The problem with that is if you stimulate demand for local food, there isn't any, so you can't buy it. So that was our problem. When we started the project, that's what we focused on, and then we gave up because it didn't make any difference. And the other thing we'll do is work with local farmers to build local supply chain, so that the farmers own it. The key to profitability in farming is that the farmers own the means to the market, right? And the minute they start selling to supermarkets, they're stuffed. Basically, they get a really low price and then they have to be subsidized by government. If they own the shops, if they own the supply chains, if they own the processing facilities, then the profit stays near the roots, as they say, and it starts to become viable. So we have to really work at that. But the local economy in the last 40 years, the local food economy in this region, as in every other region, has been completely trashed by the existing food economic system, which is all based on big selling, everything that is grown here at the moment is exported out, and everything that we buy here to eat is bought in supermarkets from somewhere else. The local food economy is tiny, absolutely tiny, and there's nothing much left of it. So we have to build every single bit of it in order for it to work. We can't depend on central government. We hope they will support this. We think they will, but if we depend on it, then we'll just end up waiting, and we can't wait. So we're forging our way ahead and hoping that we'll pull them in as we make progress. But one thing I should say is I think there's a real value in creating alliances of active projects between regions. So if you start anything in your region, we want to work with you, because if we're going to influence government, it's going to be the people who are active at the local level forging change that will do it. We will do it, grassroots up. So the moment you start getting going, please get in contact with us. We really like to work with you, because we feel so weak in relation to national government, because they look at local projects as local projects, and we're very easily pushed away. So we need to connect up with people like you. So I hopefully through Dawn we'll be able to connect. Thank you, Dawn.
Oh, thank you, Duncan. I'm really glad that you've shared. I think it's an amazing model, and I wanted others to hear about it. That idea of creating 1,200 farmers and acquiring that chunk of land, really amazing. And also for us to hear what's happening in Monmouthshire, and somebody said it in the chat, it seems like other local authorities are perhaps doing really great stuff that ours could learn a few things from. So really glad you were able to join us and share. Thank you so much, Duncan. The next part of the meeting is to go into small group discussions which are thematic, and you'll be able to choose 2 of these themes. We'll have 2 breakout sessions, and the idea is that you'll have a small group discussion focused on what can we do, how might we, what are some of the ideas and solutions that we could develop between us to make change happen. I'm going to actually start at the end and see whether, Zoe, are you ready to share a bit of a summary of what was discussed in...
Just quickly jotting everything down, loads of great ideas. We were lucky enough to have Reese in our first room as well, who's in procurement, so that was quite interesting that he was with us. As he mentioned earlier, he is part of a group which has been asked by Welsh Government to pull together the local authorities to talk specifically about this. And he mentioned that there are different organisations like CLEAS, as we know, the Community Foundational Economy Group, there's a Future Generations Group, who all come together to talk about procurement, but they're not talking together. They're all making their own little plans in silos, and so from a public procurement, from a public sector point of view, there needs to be better collaboration between the different groups that are having these conversations from the outside. There was talk about maybe there's different organisations, businesses and hospitality that could have some sort of accreditation, and local shops, some sort of accreditation that they would show on the outside that they are passionate about buying local produce and that it's sold in their particular shop. I mentioned for those who weren't here yesterday about the CK video that we shared. It was great to see, and you don't often think about a local supermarket that makes a massive effort to be able to buy locally produced foods. And I gave the example of how businesses can really make a difference with the right person in role. So Swansea City Football Club for many years wouldn't use local supply chains. and they've brought in a new commercial director who are very passionate about making sure that they use local supply chains. And since she's come in, she's made a concerted effort to reach out, find out what she can buy. And I think there's a big engagement job to do to make local businesses realise the value of doing that sort of thing.
Lovely. Let's go into land use, access and policy. Josh Pike, have we got you to give us a bit of a summary on that one?
Yeah, hi Dawn. We had some really great conversations around land use. Acknowledged like the role of councils, making it easier for the new startups and longer leases. A lot of people struggling with silly leases like 6 months and a year for land-based businesses. Supermarkets, people want them to give their profits back or buy land because that's essentially where the food is going to be ending up. Well, hopefully not, but policymakers in supporting startups and acknowledging these land-based businesses which are under 5 hectares. And we had a great, I've totally forgotten the name. I'm really sorry. Maybe you can just pop a note in the chat. But a woman who was tapping into the university campuses in Lampeter, I believe, because there's so much space in the campuses for growing and forming allotments. And then we had an idea for there to essentially be a forum which connects these bigger farms and landowners with these small startup land-based businesses, because I've known it and Abby's known it from Big Meadow CSA. When we started our CSAs, it was all because of the willingness of a local farmer to say, hey, we've got some land for you. For me, it was a case of, I'll give you that land for free for the first 2 years because it's poor land and I know you're going to need to invest a bit of money into the soil and that sort of thing. But there is a willingness out there from some of these bigger farms. And it's just about how we tap into that and create space for those conversations to happen. So maybe some kind of local forum where we can bring those two groups together.
Thanks very much, Josh. Okay, let's come to food connected communities. Laura, is that you sharing from that group?
Yes,
Great.
Thank you, Dawn. So I've got lots of great points here. So starting off, we talked a lot about awareness. So helping consumers to know that different groups exist and so that they can support, but also making sure that local movements also have an awareness of the kinds of grants and different opportunities that are actually available to them. And then we also had a theme around primary schools as well, and this cascade of intergenerational knowledge. We had a point about putting pressure on supermarkets to be more local and really using that as a lever to reach a different kind of consumer who may not be a part of these sorts of conversations that we're having today, and with a kind of a special shout out to those who are lower socioeconomic status. We also talked about the importance of embedding a different culture, and the way to do that is to really link people up. We talked about changing the conversation around food banks and really ensuring that the model that we have is much more empowering to people, giving people choice, and that makes them feel empowered. So really a change of model there. Thinking about how we talk to people who disagree with us, thinking about, the way to have those conversations so that we don't just turn people off some of the points that we're trying to make. I could go on. I've got so many points. Do you want me to stop, Dawn, or shall I carry on?
Let's have a couple more and then we'll move on, but make sure you give us all these in writing as well.
I've got them written there, yeah. So more local events that gather people together, ensuring that we have a sustainable food place within the region, at least one. Access to land, I won't carry on with that because that's been covered very well elsewhere. thinking about the different cabinet ministers who are supporting different things through committees at the moment, and making sure that we keep on top of them and keep on saying, how's this progressing through this committee, is something that we can do. And then also finally making direct approaches to private landowners and so on, and saying, you know, can we please use this, and making it attractive to them as well.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
We had such a great conversation in that group.
That's brilliant. Now, next I'm going to come to Val. Val was in Healthy Food for All. Are you there, Valeria, to share?
That's right. Yes, I am. Yes, we had quite a few common themes, but also standout ideas. We discussed, you know, food loss and waste, and, you know, it's important to see which communities, you know, when people actually need something, but at the same time it's being wasted, you know, making those dots connect. And then the big discussion, probably most of it, was the awareness and the education, really, because, you know, we have certain targets that we'll hopefully achieve in, you know, 30 years time. The new generation is key here. The problem is we identified as, you know, there is sometimes just not enough knowledge how to do certain things, in terms of, because there's skill behind it, you know, cooking and everything. For example, somebody mentioned the milk vending machines, and that's so successful, and there are queues there, and that's one concept that can be, you know, spread out, and that's innovative. But with the local produce, there's almost a little bit more effort behind it, but it's not necessarily to say that it is a difficult skill to learn, but it has to be you know, we have to look into that for sure. What I liked, also somebody mentioned, it was actually from my previous breakout room, the first one, but really these conversations that we're having, they have to keep happening. It shouldn't be just a one-off kind of conversation. Every so often, they have to become a norm. We have to gather people from different fields so that we can hear each other out. This has to be an ongoing dialogue, perhaps sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but you know, for example, after Julie's conversation, there were some questions that a lot of people brought to me during breakout rooms. So perhaps that's something that have to, you know, the dialogue has to keep going, and people are very interested in that.
There was an issue about advertising, obviously the fact that McDonald's and people like that sort of dominate the way food's advertised and dominate like the kind of food people want. So they were suggesting maybe you could advertise healthy foods along, like you'd have like maybe a farm trail, you could link that to the railway line and advertise healthy foods, healthy food like producers on trains, on stations. And another suggestion was maybe having like a market stall outside stations, so you can have like essentially like a farmer's market, and you can sort of tell people about like have growing boxes and tell people how to like cook the food in the growing boxes. And what else was there? And yeah, I mean, things like just like a lot of moments and just stuff about food education, educating people about.
Keeps coming up, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Lovely. Thanks for adding those extra ideas in. That was really valuable, actually, and particularly as for the region, we run the Community Rail Partnership. So I love hearing these ideas about connections with the railways. Thank you for that, Andrew. Right, into climate and nature. Vicky, I think that was you. Would you like to give a summary of what was discussed in your group?
We had a large group second time, and there was so much passion and urgency and creative ideas, really good ideas. But I think they could be summarized best as in three: as awareness, and geography and money. Awareness covering, which everybody keeps saying, and at the core of that was this sort of conversation. This is where the solutions are. This is where the power to deliver should be. And we need far more of it, reaching far more people. And then there's discussion of how to reach geographically into your social community to achieve that. And not everybody, we didn't have answers to that entirely, but there was definite feeling that the many, without awareness, will achieve nothing, because no matter what measures you put, people will find ways around them unless there is that conviction and understanding. So understanding awareness is the very centre. And then next to that is physical geography, your community, and what's happening in it, because there are good things happening. People are unaware. Shops attempting or achieving local produce and good quality and authentically sustainable, where they find ways around to reduce, to become zero carbon and breach, so that they're not cheating because they're committed. So knowledge and relationship to the producers in your community, which is another awareness that's also geographically defined. And then money, absolute problem of poverty, where people can't afford and is completely driven by cheapness. And then there are examples given in the group of people producing food as cheap as supermarkets, but people don't know about that. So it can be done. It is being done. It's not, some food is too cheap for sure, but overall it can be produced affordably. One key way to get round the cheapness issue is true cost accounting and making polluters pay. And that would only be acceptable, going back to the awareness, once people understand. So awareness is again crucial to that. But then if you did have true cost accounting and polluter pays, there'd be no more problem with bad food being cheap, because sustainable food would be cheap and affordable. And I think those probably, and then there's, in the other group as well, there was lots of putting two solutions together to create putting two problems together to create a solution. So wherever you have problems, see what other problems match it. Like you can't get labour and farming, monoculture is boring, change both and make farms as places of education and inspiration, and your labour problem was solved. And that links back to the schools. So, putting all these pieces together to create solutions like a jigsaw. Instead of having a broken system, you put the pieces together, create a great picture.
Final theme was future of farming. Kerry, I think you were facilitating.
Yep.
Yes, great.
Or attempting to. I was greatly humbled, and I always am, and very grateful for the learning opportunities given. But everybody spoke with passion and actually a lot of concern in terms of obviously land as being a recurring theme in this. But it's not necessarily as much support with costs, obviously, but with the acquisition process itself potentially as well, and support with the land management, not in terms of how you manage the land as farmers, but how people connect with each other and how you sort of have those conversations with potential developers or potential sort of people who are selling or renting the land to you as well. So how much do they understand about it? Which led into an awful lot of discussion around generally, yes, have the conversations, have them more often, have discussions like that. But as much as we as lay people also need to know what do you need us to know, because there are an awful lot of us out there potentially to help and sort of become allies and resources for you as well. Let us know what you need us to know. So that was something going forwards. A big personal thing on my part, because I really do like marketing and branding and things, but the idea of rebranding the farming profession. And I think the passion comes from the fact that one lady in particular, it's a viable but miraculous profession. I thought, you know what, yeah, we don't sort of push that enough potentially. So if the average age of a farmer is around 60 years old, we could do with encouragement of young farmers. And let's look at actually rebranding this in a very serious and concerted way and see it as an investment for the future going forwards as well. This isn't just a gimmick to try and get one or two people in. This is actually a full economic pathway for people and something that we really should be looking at as a long-term investment and solution. Around that sort of, we've got support in terms of costs, but support to help compete with commercial models. And one very interesting suggestion as well on the outside was actually allowing or enabling people to buy at higher prices. So as much as it's about supporting farmers, do we support and enable people to buy at the higher prices so we're not having to undercut commercial models and practices? An awareness of the big picture. And again, I think that comes back to sort of discussion, keep talking and keep telling people and educating. And that's not just schools, that's throughout the entirety of life, so that we know how it all integrates and how it connects. So as we've got in this, sorry, I go with the wages have increased sort of throughout. I mean, that's been a bit of a gaffe. I think, yes, somebody brought it up by Boris Johnson recently. So wages might have increased or something similar, but where do farmers see that? Is that something that actually that's not really what we're seeing on this farm or in this sort of profession as well? And I think as when we're talking about sort of support, and especially in terms of monetary support and grants and things like that, we have to be very careful. There will be people who will fall between the gaps. And we see that with an awful lot of our other industries or community groups and things, that not everybody fits into these self-designated halls and places. And we really need to be watching out for things that potentially are doing something completely different or something that looks absolutely sort of normative, but they'll fall through gaps because we didn't put the support there for everyone. So really sort of having a bit of a target around, yeah, and who else are we missing? Again, it's got to be a massive sort of community integration project in that way, and some understanding really about how this affects everyone from ground up. So not necessarily sort of bottom down. We're looking at building something that works with everyone. Not easy. But I mean, again, baby steps. Take it one step at a time, but be very aware that you need to help everyone.
Listen to the comments that have been made in the last 10 minutes and all in favour of whatever local activity we can encourage, organise, etc. But I think all of us must keep an eye on the national and international situation, because we are at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads of farming after coming out of Europe without a policy to defend it from other producers who operate at a much lower cost basis. And I don't want to see us going back into a situation where we find our producers outpriced and imports coming pouring in. That would be a disaster. If you listen to the farming this morning at 5:45, you'll have heard one of the executives of the slaughterhouses talking about the pig problem in Yorkshire and his frustration, not just on the immediate problem of being unable to slaughter the pigs, but that government is not interested in supporting a policy which will deliver the quality of food and the quantity of food that we need. They'd rather import it. And that is well worth listening to if you get the chance. It is a very dangerous situation. Thank you very much for your opportunity to say something.
Thank you, Edward. Really key point there about the danger of importing low quality food. Much appreciated.
It's not necessarily low quality, but it's in quantities that we can't compete with.
Yeah, okay, understood. Thank you very much for that. Phil, what can we do? What shall we do?
Well, I just want to add, I agree exactly with points that have just been made about importing, and throughout this conference there's been a real emphasis on increasing local food supplies, local food production. But I just want to flag up something which I don't think I've really heard over the last couple of days much, and that is around where we are importing food, thinking about the welfare of people overseas, the producers overseas, particularly when we're talking about products that produce that we can't produce here at the moment anyway, and thinking about supporting fair trade systems and similar systems that try to ensure the well-being of producers right around the world. I think that's important, an important element of this conversation as well.
Yeah, that's really important. We haven't spoken much about the 7 well-being goals. I normally start with those, finish with those and talk about them all the way through, but being a globally responsible Wales is one of our goals, isn't it? So the fair trade movement and recommitting to making sure we're shopping ethically and importing ethically as well. Thank you, Phil. Laura, what can we do?
Thanks so much. I just wanted to talk a little bit about leveraging research that we're doing. So I'm work at Swansea University, and we are conducting research on, how we can best engage with consumers to embrace sustainable food practice and sustainable food products. And, we really want to reflect the different viewpoints, some of which we've heard today. So, you know, if you do see advertisements from people like me saying, you know, get your voice heard and be part of a focus group, you know, please do, because we want to use that information to create reports that we can then give back to communities, give back to people as evidence for grant proposals and things like that, but also try to get our viewpoint heard on a national and international kind of stage by publishing things.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's loads of academic research and insight that we could leverage more in the real world, as it were, and use more in communities. And Julie James mentioned this thing about embracing technology and research and development into innovation and new techniques and technologies. So it's linking up what happens within universities with what's happening in communities and in businesses. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, great. Right. We're running out of time. Final 15 minutes of this session. So rest assured that all of the discussions are going to be captured and whipped up into easy reading, really active reports and calls to action. And as I said, sort of to-do lists for us all following today's meeting. But in the last 15 minutes, I'd like to really focus on what are we going to do? And perhaps there are people in this group now who are already pushing forward on some of the ideas that we've heard from.
One of the things which I think there's a lot of agreement on was events like this, which actually could make a difference because they're working with at some level of government, local authority or central government or any other body with regulatory powers such as NRW. And that's something we could take forward if people wanted to join and help that to happen. We do have to persuade those who have their handles on levers of regulations or power to buy into the conclusions and to take advantage of the rich ideas which are coming out of this, those which are most doable. So that's a suggestion. I know that there's other people in this meeting with the skills to organise events like this. This one has been brilliantly organised, but rather than it all being, you know, so we could help people like Sean Cox, for example. So that's one suggestion of something which could come out of this. And secondly, but less, is visits to see what's going on in your area. People want to do that. We have examples of having done it before.
I would like to help to bring fresh local produce to Neath, probably using empty buildings, especially with meat and fish. We can get vegetables in the market, we can't get meat, we can't get fish. It's just not available. I have talked to councils about it before, the Carmarthenshire County Council. I've talked to Neil Griffiths about it. Nothing seems to happen. I'm passionate that people will buy healthy local food if they can see it and it's there for them. They can't, so they don't.
I'd really like to be part of a working group to support, well, a number of things, like support development of CSA, community supported agriculture around our area, and then also particularly to support training and access for new entrants and young people who want to access land-based activities. So, like, you know, just any kind of support, whether that's putting pressure on government to provide financial support for startups or funding training programs, but basically just looking at like a really how we help young people get a foot up into and onto land and develop projects effectively.
Lots of people are talking about making connections between food communities, farmers, producers, schools, etc. And I have a small salad growing and herb growing business here in Carmarthenshire, which I'd just like to say I'm happily available for anyone to come and have a visit, whether it's a school visit or a community group or another grower that wants to know what I do. People have approached me from time to time and asked me to do something like this. And do you know, the reason I usually say no is because I'm just me and I'm too busy to stop for half a day or a day sometimes because I'm on a round of picking and delivering or trying to get something grown or weeded by a certain date. So what I would say is if someone wants to come, any kind of group or individual or whatever, I'm very happy to host somebody but could they think about how to compensate me? And that doesn't necessarily mean money. It could be bring a few pairs of gloves and come and do some weeding for me while you talk to me. I'm literally up for that. And I just wanted to put that in the group now, and I'll put my contact details in the chat.
I think one of the pieces I'm working on is engaging with hospitality businesses to try and get them to look at more local and regional sourcing. So I don't know whether there's an opportunity to maybe sort of take a break out from today and look at organising an event that maybe gets a lot of hospitality catering businesses together to actually ask them across the region what they're looking for. What are the priority products? Do they understand the value of local products or Welsh produce to the consumers? And what are their barriers to actually selling more of that? Because I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, to pardon the pun, but the more people are used to going out and seeing Welsh provenance and local produce put in front of them on a menu as a real choice, even if it is short term at a premium, then I think it will drive that demand. And I think, you know, as one of the farmers said earlier, they kind of need the demand to refocus their supply chain. And I think that's something that with a lot of the businesses across the region, we could start to drive that dynamic and that awareness, and it will start to get its own momentum if we're careful. And, you know, and I'm sure you've got very good contacts with Swansea Bid and various other cluster networks that we could try and, you know, pull that into quite a targeted feedback session.
It's a little action that we can all take away as the conference comes to an end then. And that we can all start to do is to, as we did the little exercise last night of looking in our fridges and cupboards about what are we as individuals buying locally. And I think that's something that we can all start doing after this conference, is actually making sure that we're looking at what staple foods we're buying, that we are doing our best to buy local produce. And if we can't find it in our local shops and supermarkets, put a little bit of pressure on them to say why. And again, as Richard just mentioned about the hospitality sector, maybe finding out what are their barriers, why aren't they buying locally produced food. And I just think that's a little thing that we can all take away.
Our intention now is to capture everything, including those project ideas and initiatives, and start to help to facilitate the formation of little working groups and to support those of you that are already doing great stuff. And of course, to make available all the content and the wisdom from today that might inform your own projects and organisations as you go forward. I said it at the beginning, you know, the agenda doesn't belong to anyone, and the opportunity to make a difference and have agency within this does not belong to anyone. So please do take what you can, do what you can, and keep us in the loop, because we would love to support and amplify everything that is already happening in the region and whatever outcomes we can create from this important conversation. Really interesting, I think, the conversation about the intersection of diet and health, and I think connecting with the food, with the health boards in our region and sharing the outcomes from today's conference with them and seeing what appetite there is within the health boards to collaborate more in communities and across organisations. I see a sort of key opportunity area there as well. But this is just the beginning. I think everyone said it. We need more conversations, more collaboration, more meetings, more activities, sharing the knowledge. We've heard some inspiring stories today from what people are already doing, and so many who aren't here. So hopefully we can build and grow this ecosystem of those of us across the region that really want to help transform the food system, supporting farmers, making access to locally produced food more universal, improving health and well-being, creating opportunities for young people to get into the sector, making more land available. I can't possibly synopsize everything that we've discussed in these last few words, but I hope for you it's been an inspiring and motivating discussion. For the Region is a not-for-profit alliance. No one's paid us to do this. We've had no luck in getting sponsorship. We did ask the NFU for sponsorship and a number of other partners. No luck. But we keep trying to do our best to bring people together and make change happen and enable collaboration and amplify the good stuff. So we're a membership alliance. A quick plug, if you'd like to become a member of For the Region, maybe one of my colleagues will share our link in the chat. Do consider supporting us. You can do that from just £5 a month, or if you're a business, you can join us as an ambassador. I found it really inspiring. I've loved hearing different voices from across the region and from across the system. We take a really systemic view of how we transform South West Wales, and we start from the premise that the future of our region is in all our hands, and we're most motivated by the well-being of future generations and kids in our communities, and their opportunities in life, and how we can help to make South West Wales somewhere that everyone can flourish and thrive. And we feel like this is the best place to live in the whole of the UK, and we want South West Wales to lead the way in showing how we can transition to a more sustainable, more equitable, less alienating way of life. And I think we have everything here within our region and on our doorsteps to make change happen. And with the sort of motivated, passionate activists and community members, businesses and organisations that we've heard from today, I think we really can make a difference. But it doesn't happen overnight. It's lots of small steps, it's lots of collaboration, so we need much more of this. So thank you all for giving up your time. It's been 6 solid hours of conversation over the last 2 days, huge amount to digest. So we'll be getting on with that. We'll keep you in touch. But for now, thank you very much for your time. Bye for now.
Thanks, bye.